What would drive a sheriff to murder a judge? This chilling case uncovers a deadly confrontation that left a small Kentucky courthouse shaken to its core. A courtroom meant for justice became a stage for an unspeakable crime. Today we uncover the events that turned a trusted lawman into a suspected murderer and unravel the mystery behind a fateful encounter that no one saw coming. Letcher County, Kentucky, nestled in the heart of Appalachia, is a place where time seems to linger a little longer. It's a quiet, close-knit community where everyone knows their neighbors, and life moves with the steady rhythm of the mountains that surround it. The courthouse sits at the center of this town, not just as a place of law but as a pillar of order and trust, a place where people feel safe and justice is served. District Judge Kevin Mullins was a man of steady principles, known for his dedication to upholding the law fairly. Respected by locals, Mullins was seen as a figure of integrity, the kind of judge who listened more than he spoke, always making time for his community both in and out of the courtroom. On the other hand, Sheriff Shawn Stines, a familiar face in Letcher County, was a man with a long career in law enforcement. To the public, he was someone who had built a reputation for keeping order, a seasoned sheriff with decades of service and a deep familiarity with the area's people and challenges. But beneath this familiarity, the dynamic between these two men was more complicated than it appeared. It was a regular September day at the courthouse, until everything changed. What began as an ordinary day would soon unravel into a nightmare no one could have anticipated. Sheriff Shawn Stines was no stranger to the people of Letcher County. A lifelong resident, he began his career in law enforcement in his 20s and quickly became a familiar figure across town. Known for his firm stance on crime and a tough, no-nonsense approach, he prided himself on his commitment to maintaining order. Over the years, though, Sheriff Stines' tenure wasn't without its challenges. Some residents found his methods unyielding, even controversial. There were whispers around town about Sheriff Stines' strict enforcement style, with some questioning whether his iron grip was as much about control as it was about protection. But in a place like Letcher County, a strong sheriff was often valued, and Stines held his position with authority. On the other hand, Judge Kevin Mullins was a voice of measured justice. Known for his calm demeanor and his deliberate, thoughtful approach to the law, Mullins had gained the respect of his community through years of service. He was a man who weighed each case carefully, a judge who valued compassion alongside the law. Mullins was often seen as the counterbalance to the sheriff's hardline methods, an advocate for fairness in a world where lines could sometimes blur. Many saw him as a guardian of integrity within the county's legal system. But as years went by, the professional relationship between Sheriff Stines and Judge Mullins grew tense. Where Stines saw strict measures as a necessity, Mullins questioned the ethical boundaries. Rumors of a dispute began to surface, murmurs that the two were often at odds over cases involving the sheriff's deputies and their conduct in the field. Some said there were meetings that ended in heated exchanges, moments when respect between two pillars of the community seemed to fracture. Underneath the surface of Letcher County's tranquil exterior, a conflict was quietly building between these two men, a conflict that neither could ignore for much longer. It was an ordinary September day at the courthouse, but behind closed doors in Judge Kevin Mullins' chambers, an extraordinary confrontation was unfolding. Sheriff Stines had come in with a fire in his eyes, his stance rigid and voice sharp. Their earlier disagreements had reached a boiling point, and on this day, what started as a tense discussion quickly spiraled into a heated clash. Voices echoed within the walls as accusations flew between the judge and the sheriff. Stines' frustration grew with every word, and Mullins, unwavering in his principles, stood his ground. What began as a dispute over law enforcement had turned deeply personal, years of simmering tensions surfacing in a moment that would change everything. Then, in a moment of shocking violence, Sheriff Stines allegedly drew his gun, Judge Mullins, realizing the peril he was in, scrambled to find safety, ducking behind his desk. But it was too late. The first shot rang out, then another and another. As Mullins tried to shield himself, he was met with a barrage of bullets. A terrifying and heartbreaking end, captured in silent horror on surveillance footage. As the last shot rang out, silence fell over the courthouse, but the worst was far from over. In a place meant to uphold justice, the unthinkable had occurred. A sheriff, the very embodiment of law, had turned on a judge. The echoes of those gunshots left more than just silence. They left a wound in the heart of Letcher County, one that would be hard to heal. The news of Judge Kevin Mullins' death spread through Letcher County like wildfire, leaving residents in utter disbelief. In a small town where everyone knew each other, where people trusted their leaders, the idea that their own sheriff had allegedly gunned down a respected judge was inconceivable. Families gathered in shock, whispers filling the quiet town streets as they tried to make sense of the unthinkable. It was as if the bedrock of their community had crumbled in an instant. For those who worked at the courthouse, the impact was even more profound. Colleagues who had seen Judge Mullins only hours before, who had heard his familiar voice echo through the halls, were suddenly faced with the harsh reality of his absence. Office doors were closed, desks sat empty, and in every corner of the building was an overwhelming stillness, a sorrow that no words could capture. Court employees, many of whom had been there for years, struggled to process the loss. For them, Judge Mullins wasn't just a judge, he was a friend, a mentor, a familiar face that brought calm to the intensity of their daily work. Many stood outside the courthouse, eyes red and faces pale, as they tried to support each other in the face of something that seemed impossible to grasp. Letcher County had always taken pride in its peace and unity. But now, a fracture ran deep through the town, leaving residents to wonder how they could ever find peace in a place where justice itself had been betrayed. As the courthouse reeled from the shock, law enforcement quickly mobilized to secure the scene, though this time it wasn't a typical crime investigation. The alleged perpetrator was one of their own, a respected sheriff, who had served alongside them for years. Officers approached the scene with a somber caution, roping off Judge Mullins' chambers and meticulously preserving every piece of evidence. They knew this investigation had to be handled with the utmost care. Every detail scrutinized, every protocol followed, as the eyes of the entire county, if not the state, would soon be upon them. Investigators began piecing together what little they knew. The surveillance footage captured Stines' violent outburst, but the question that lingered was why. What could possibly drive Sheriff Stines, a man known for his dedication to law and order, to commit such an unthinkable act? Colleagues whispered in hushed tones, suggesting possible motives that ranged from personal vendettas to professional grievances. Some speculated that the tension between Stines and Mullins had escalated due to the pending lawsuit involving one of Stines' deputies, a case that Judge Mullins had been overseeing. Was it revenge? A moment of unchecked rage? Or was there something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface? But the investigation would soon reveal a dark, hidden truth that shocked everyone involved. As investigators combed through the crime scene, one piece of evidence stood out above all else: the surveillance footage. The grainy black and white recording offered a stark, silent recounting of the events that had unfolded in Judge Mullins' chambers. In the footage, Mullins is seen making a desperate attempt to find safety, scrambling under his desk as Sheriff Stines approached. With no sound to accompany it, the footage left viewers with a haunting silence, each frame capturing a chilling snapshot of Mullins' last moments. It was the kind of evidence that left no room for interpretation, a visual record that confirmed the brutal nature of the confrontation. Beyond the video, investigators gathered every detail they could find from the scene. Bullet casings were meticulously collected and cataloged, each one marking a moment in the tragic sequence. The forensic team documented the pattern of the shots, providing insights into the moments Mullins had tried to shield himself. Blood spatter analysis confirmed his position as he sought cover, reinforcing the horrifying realization that he was caught off guard, with nowhere to escape. Every piece of evidence, every frame of that footage, painted a picture of a crime that seemed both calculated and deeply personal. The investigators were left with the undeniable conclusion that this was no accident, no sudden loss of control. It was an attack that seemed deliberate, leaving them to wonder, what had truly pushed Sheriff Stines to commit such a cold-blooded act? As the investigation continued, a possible motive began to surface. A lawsuit involving one of Sheriff Stines' own deputies. The case, a sensitive matter under Judge Mullins' review, had the potential to impact not only the deputy's career, but also Stines' reputation. For Sheriff Stines, whose position was built on his authority and unyielding control over his department, the idea of a courtroom battle casting doubt on his leadership may have felt like a personal threat. Sources close to the courthouse whispered that Stines had grown increasingly frustrated with Judge Mullins' handling of the case. The judge, known for his impartiality, was committed to uncovering the truth, regardless of the sheriff's standing in the community. To Stines, it seemed as though Mullins was challenging his authority, holding the sheriff's department to a level of scrutiny that he wasn't prepared to accept. Rumors suggested that these tensions had spilled over in private encounters, creating a rift that could no longer be ignored. Yet, as investigators dug deeper, some began to wonder, was the lawsuit really the only source of friction between these two men? Or was there something darker lurking beneath? The search for answers was far from over, and with every new piece of information, the picture grew more complex, hinting at motives yet to be uncovered. With mounting evidence and the undeniable footage from the courthouse security cameras, authorities moved quickly to arrest Sheriff Shawn "Mickey" Stines. The once trusted lawman, now accused of murder, was formally charged with first-degree murder, a decision that shook Letcher County to its core. Many in the community struggled to comprehend how their sheriff, a man sworn to protect, could be at the center of such a horrific crime. Friends, neighbors, and former supporters stood in stunned silence as the news broke, the weight of betrayal hanging heavy over the town. When Stines was brought into the courtroom for his first appearance, the air was thick with tension. The small room, usually reserved for quiet hearings and procedural cases, was packed with residents, reporters, and courthouse employees, all watching with a mix of disbelief and unease. Stines, who had once walked these halls with authority, now stood before the bench as a defendant, a stark reversal that highlighted the gravity of the situation. His face betrayed little emotion, but the charged atmosphere left no doubt. This would be a legal battle that would hold the county captive. As the judge read out the charges, the room remained hushed. The only sounds, the shuffle of papers, and the quiet murmurs of onlookers. For Letcher County, this was more than just a murder case. It was a reckoning, a confrontation with the dark reality that even those meant to uphold the law could fall prey to their own demons. And for Sheriff Stines, it was the beginning of a journey through the justice system that few could have ever imagined. Just as the case against Sheriff Stines seemed ironclad, a shocking twist emerged, one that threw the courtroom and the entire investigation into disarray. During a key session, the defense introduced new testimony from a courthouse employee who had reportedly overheard a heated exchange between Judge Mullins and Sheriff Stines weeks before the murder. According to this witness, the argument had escalated over not just the deputy's lawsuit, but an alleged personal matter involving both men, something neither had ever spoken about publicly. The testimony hinted at a deeply personal rift, one that ran far deeper than a professional disagreement. The witness described hearing Stines accuse Judge Mullins of undermining his authority, even hinting that the judge was privy to certain sensitive information that could jeopardize the sheriff's reputation. This revelation cast the sheriff's motives in a new, disturbing light, suggesting that his actions may have been driven by fear of exposure, not just professional frustration. The courtroom reacted with shock, whispers filling the aisles as the weight of the new information set in. For many in attendance, this twist changed everything. It wasn't just a case of a sheriff lashing out under pressure. It was now tinged with suspicion, secrecy, and desperation. Prosecutors scrambled to adjust their strategy, recognizing that this new layer of complexity could alter the course of the trial, while Stines' defense team saw a glimmer of hope to build a counter-narrative. In an instant, what had seemed like a clear-cut case of murder now blurred into something more tangled and mysterious, leaving everyone to wonder what other secrets lay beneath the surface, and if they would ever truly know the whole story. The trial of Sheriff Shawn Stines unfolded as a tense and emotionally charged battle in the courtroom, captivating Letcher County and far beyond. The prosecution argued that Stines' actions were premeditated, pointing to the surveillance footage and the witness testimonies as undeniable proof. They painted a picture of a man who, out of anger and personal resentment, took justice into his own hands and committed an unthinkable act of violence against a respected judge. Their strategy hinged on showing that the conflict between Stines and Mullins was far more than a professional dispute. It was deeply personal and had ultimately turned deadly. In contrast, the defense worked tirelessly to reframe Stines' actions. They portrayed him as a man pushed to the edge by the pressures of his position and by what they claimed were Judge Mullins' relentless attempts to undermine him. The defense suggested that Stines had acted impulsively, not out of malice, but out of a momentary lapse, a tragic culmination of stress, anger, and fear. They seized on the witness testimony, suggesting a hidden personal conflict, hoping to cast doubt on the idea that this was a cold-blooded murder. They argued that Stines had been overwhelmed, his judgment clouded by the strain of his role and his deteriorating relationship with the judge. After days of testimony, cross-examinations, and emotional closing arguments, the jury was left to decide. The courtroom fell silent as the jury filed back in, each face solemn, carrying the weight of the decision they were about to deliver. The foreperson stood and, in a clear voice, read the verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. Stines stood motionless as the words echoed through the room, his face a mask of disbelief and resignation. For his family, the reality of the verdict was crushing, an irreversible moment that shattered their lives. The community, too, felt the weight of the decision. Letcher County's trust in its legal system had been restored, but at a tremendous cost. When sentencing day arrived, the judge handed down a life sentence, ensuring that Stines would spend the rest of his days behind bars. For Judge Mullins' family, the verdict brought a measure of closure, though nothing could truly heal the loss they had suffered. The community, once united in pride for its local heroes, was left grappling with the aftermath of betrayal, a wound that would not soon fade. In the end, Letcher County was left to pick up the pieces, forever changed by a case that had exposed the darkest corners of its trusted institutions and reminded everyone of the complex, often hidden, lives behind the badges and robes. The aftermath of Judge Kevin Mullins' murder left an indelible mark on Letcher County. In a place where people once took comfort in knowing their community leaders personally, a sense of loss and betrayal now lingered. For courthouse staff, returning to work was painful. The hallways and chambers were shadowed with memories of a colleague they had respected and trusted. Every desk, every case file, seemed to hold echoes of Judge Mullins' presence, a constant reminder of the man who had stood as a pillar of fairness in their lives. As the community began its slow journey toward healing, many in Letcher County found themselves questioning the very institutions they had once revered. How could a man charged with upholding the law turn against it so violently? What signs, if any, had been missed? These questions lingered, and for some the answers remained elusive, deepening a sense of caution and loss. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the hidden complexities behind public roles. The courtroom, a place meant to protect the innocent and bring justice to those who break the law, had become a stage for one of the most profound betrayals the town had ever witnessed. For both the families involved and the people of Letcher County, the crime's legacy was a painful one, forcing a re-evaluation of what it means to trust those in power. In the end, the case of Sheriff Stines and Judge Mullins became more than just a tragic chapter in Letcher County's history. It was a sobering lesson in the hidden battles that can lie within the hearts of those we trust most. The courthouse eventually resumed its rhythm, but for everyone who lived through this tragedy, a shadow remained, a reminder of how one man's actions could fracture a community, and how even in the pursuit of justice, the cost could be far too human. As we close this tragic chapter, one question lingers. What drives a person in power to cross such a tragic line? Was it a moment of unbearable pressure, or a darker side that had been hiding in plain sight all along? Sheriff Stines' story forces us to confront the complexities of human nature and the fragile boundaries between authority and accountability. We want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe justice was served, or was there something more at play here that we may never fully understand? Let us know in the comments below. Your perspective matters. And if you found this story as haunting and thought-provoking as we did, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. We bring new true crime cases every day, delving into the stories that shape our communities and challenge our understanding of justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and until next time, stay curious and stay safe.